Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about White Lotus Season 3. I just finished the season finale yesterday. I've been ruminating on it and watching a bunch of videos and looking at what everyone has to say online, and I can't wait to give a full spoiler breakdown and discussion of White Lotus Season 3 in its entirety. Things that jumped out to me, themes, character by character, just everything. First, I'm going to open with a spoiler-free recommendation review, and then we'll get into the full spoiler breakdown. That will be the majority of the video. Now, spoiler-free thoughts, for those of you who don't know what White Lotus is. If you don't know what White Lotus is, what are you doing, man? But White Lotus is an anthology series, sort of. This season does actually have a lot of connective tissue to earlier seasons, but essentially each season is its own set of characters and it follows rich people on vacation, all right? Which doesn't sound that juicy. And the first season especially was kind of just a light, slight, breezy comedy with some very clear societal, cultural commentary weaved into it very effectively, in my opinion. But season 1, compared to season 2 and 3, is like a light entry point. Season 2 took a much darker and more sexually kind of pernicious tone. And by season 3, this show is a full-on Greek Shakespearean tragedy at points. This show is dark and cruel and menacing at points, but also, if you can kind of ride the wave with it, wickedly funny. Wickedly funny. Now, this season specifically of White Lotus is kind of very interested in our relationship with violence, our lust for violence. For those of you who don't know, each season of White Lotus kind of hints at a death, and I just want to have a brief tangent on this. I've never watched this show as a murder mystery, all right? Like, each season I know kind of implies that there will be at least one death while on holiday, but I've always, especially given how the first 2 deaths are presented, I've always seen it as a nice little hook for the show, but I've never seen this show as a murder mystery. But this season feels different. This season opens with hints of what sounds like a mass casualty shooting, and I think it really does want you to be sitting there and reckoning with who is going to take that turn, what is going to happen, how did we get here, because again, this season is very interested in when we as a society, when we as individuals choose to indulge in violence. Is it ever okay? Does it ever lead to good outcomes? And this is explored mainly, I think the people that really hold the thematic weight here is the kind of conflict between Gaitok and Mook, all right? So Gaitok is a security guard who is having trouble resorting to and leaning on violence to perform his job well, and Mook is someone he has romantic feelings for and is trying to court, and she essentially sees him as less of a man and as incompetent because he won't lean into violence. And this struggle as to whether there is ever an appropriate time for violence, whether violence always leads to bad outcomes, is essentially spread out over all the characters and groups we follow in some capacity or another. It's very much explored through the Ratliff family and this dad that is dealing with a crisis of existence, right? Like whether he has any worth within himself. So there's internalized violence, and where that plot goes, I'm keeping it spoiler free, but the direction it heads is a really interesting exploration into a dark part of society that a lot of shows don't really talk about it, but we'll get into that in the spoiler section. On top of that, the exploration of Rick and his thirst for vengeance and his thirst for violent revenge about what was done to his father is very much about whether he will pick the violent side or not, whether he can just be with this gorgeous woman Chelsea who just wants a nice love story with him, or whether he is going to lean into his worst tendencies and just go down the path of violence. And even with the 3 friends, Jackie, Lauren, and Kate, a lot of their tension is just very cliquey, gossipy, kind of womanly drama. But I think the thing is, even that, there is a discussion there about whether it's worth actually leaning into kind of violent communication, whether non-violent communication is always the way to go. Is it always the right thing to be polite and smile and deal with things that actually cut you deep? Or is there a case for actual violent communication? And the way their arc goes and the fact that we're left sitting there wanting this explosion that we may or may not get is really, really well done. On top of that, I think this season very much has a male-centric focus. Compared to the first 2 seasons that felt like they were really interested in exploring kind of female catty dynamics, and the dudes for the most part are kind of the secondary characters, I think in this season all of the conflict, or most of the conflict, is centered around the male characters and this toxicity that they spread outwards. Men are typically seen as the more violent sex, so I think it very much checks out, but I think the way this season in particular focuses on kind of men's internalized rage and violence and how it seeps outwards and corrupts is really effective and really interesting, and it is no more further exemplified what I'm saying here, and the fact that this this is clearly intentional by the show, than Sam Rockwell's monologue that he presents to us in the middle of the season. So Sam Rockwell shows up at a certain point in this season and delivers this monologue about how he uses sex in a very violent way to kind of like figure himself out and figure out power, and kind of like it's all about him and understanding himself and conquering the world. It's incredibly interesting.
Always different ones. Petite ones, chubby ones, older ones, sometimes multiple ladies a night. Why do I feel this need to fuck all these women? The form of this cute Asian girl, why does it have such a grip on me? I realized I could fuck a million women, I'd still never be satisfied. I still miss that pussy, man.
And we'll dig more into it in the spoiler discussion. But I think this monologue really hammers down that this is a central focus of the show, this idea that men on their pursuits for power, fame, wealth, money, sex will just spread violence and toxicity outwards in a very interesting way. And you compare that with the conflict between Jackie, Lauren, and Kate, who, by the way, are also being fucked over by dudes throughout this season, and their core conflict is dudes. But on top of that, their conflict at the end of the day causes no harm to anyone except each other. And even then, it's very minute. You compare that to the pain and suffering that Rick's conflict causes, or Timothy Ratliff's conflict causes, and it's night and day. It's incredibly fascinating. The only point where this is really flipped is the idea that Guy Talk is the one struggling to indulge in violence. He kind of refuses it. He doesn't want to. But in virtue of wanting to impress Mook, sleep with Mook, be with Mook, he decides to really reckon with this, and it becomes a possibility for him. And I think that's the only point where this show is kind of flipping that on its head slightly. But at the end of the day, he is leaning into an outdated view of masculinity. Mook is leaning into an outdated view of masculinity, and Guy Talk is taking the bait. Incredibly fascinating.
Also, what I was saying about the kind of like female gaze or female view of it is in like the first season, one of the most notable conflicts was between the guy that wanted the upgraded room and Alexandra Daddario's character. And that whole conflict was very much, even though he was the star of that conflict, it was about how she sees that conflict. Whereas in this season, a lot of the conflicts are what's going on internally with these men, and the women are kind of responding to that. It's very much through their lens for the most part.
Now, before we get into the spoiler discussion, there's one thing I want to talk about, and that's the music of this season. The music of this season is popping off. There's this music that plays in sentimental scenes that is so beautiful. It pops up in the final scene between Jackie, Lauren, and Kate. Gorgeous, gorgeous music. And on top of that, there's this music that plays in the first episode where all the different groups are starting to gossip and problems are arising. It's that one where it sounds like a bird is making this like whoop, whoop sound. It's hypnotic and catchy and so fun to listen to. But the last song I want to talk about is the intro music goes the fuck off. I am so sick of hearing... first off, the internet's response to White Lotus Season 3 as a whole is just insane. It is genuinely diabolical. But hearing people complain that the Season 3 intro music was not the same as the first two seasons was so out of pocket. Like, I fundamentally disagree. It was such a refreshing change. It represents this darker, more spiritual, like, out-of-body tone that Season 3 embodies. On top of that, I like, again, like, similar to the fact that the whole season you're waiting for this violent explosion, this song just kind of edges you the entire time up until the last 20 seconds where the beat finally drops. Aside from that, you're seeing there the whole time. It's just this constantly rising tension. I think it represents the season perfectly. On top of that, I know there was a leak that the composer did because apparently he fell out with Mike White. There's a leaked version where they bring back the thing from the first two seasons. They bring that back at the end of this one. It sounds like shit. I'm so sorry. Everyone on TikTok being like, this is what we deserve the whole time. This is it. I'm like, no, this is bad. It doesn't fit the tone at all. Call me a contrarian, but I hate it. One final thing before we get into spoiler talk. I think Saxon and Lachlan and Piper very much represent that male thing I was talking about before. Saxon has he clearly has this complex of trying to be the alpha male and sleeping with a bunch of women, and it comes off really poorly. Like, he's not achieving this, like, charming line he thinks he is. Saxon is not the slayer he thinks he is, all right? He embodies this thing of like, we need to be this big and we need to court women this way, and spreads it on Lachlan, and the way it comes back around where Lachlan internalizes it and puts it back on Saxon quite literally is a really fascinating dynamic. And I also think the fact that Piper feels like she's almost a victim of their kind of like toxic back and forth between Saxon and Lachlan, this kind of weird sexual energy that's constantly kind of circulating the family, and Piper has to navigate that, is really fascinating. But again, that'll be a full spoiler discussion. Watch the season. If any of this interested you up until this point, watch the season and get back to me, because it's a wild, wild ride. Now let's get into the spoiler talk of White Lotus season 3. All right, let's start heavy. Let's start with the Ratliff family. More specifically, let's start with Timothy Ratliff. So long story short, if you haven't seen the season, essentially Timothy goes on holiday because his daughter Piper is doing a thesis, right? So he takes her to this rich, fancy Thailand holiday, and while he's there, his entire rich business is falling apart due to what sounds like tax fraud or corruption or some financial shit he's pulled that is going to land him in jail and leave his family broke, all right? This is set up from season 1. He's basically constantly on the phone just hearing bad news. And I think what is so well done about this plot is, even though it's slow moving, I think Mike White, what he manages to do here in terms of plopping you in his headspace is remarkable. Remarkable, all right? Hear me on this, because where this character goes and the fact that you're still with the show and understand how he got here is insane. So you're following Timothy on this journey, and I think his impending sense of dread is almost something you can touch, all right? It's so expertly well done, and every time his phone goes off, you feel dread. You're watching him bullshit his family. Now, Mike White in an interview has actually talked about that this whole story, Everywhere It Goes, was based on a real life thing of this guy being in trouble while on holiday and not having the guts to tell his family, and then essentially planning to wipe out his family. But I think the way this was slowly built up was expertly well done. We also have him starting getting addicted to lorazepam. He's someone who never takes drugs. He outlines this. He starts taking lorazepam and slowly starts having fantasies of taking himself out of this world, right? Self-deleting, for lack of a better term. So I am a victim of YouTube's kind of censorship policy, which is such a shame when you're talking about a show as juicy and salacious as The White Lotus. But regardless, he starts having like fantasies of taking himself out of this world with a gun, right? And then from there, what I really didn't expect is they have this fake out where he does do it. He holds a gun to his head and pulls the trigger, and Piper and Victoria run in and they're mortified. And I was like, oh my God, we're going there already. We're halfway through the season. Here we go. I took the bait. Like, I did actually take the bait. Now they reel it back. And at this point I was frustrated with the season. I was like, ooh, if you're going to show me a dream sequence, that now rules out that as a possibility, because it's not going to have the same impact twice, right? You can't then have a scene where he does that and have me feel it. But no. They escalate it. So I do forgive that dream sequence, because from there, he has this discussion with Victoria where he's trying to like ascertain whether she's going to be okay with him after he loses his money, his status. Again, this leans into what I was saying before about how this is all about kind of the patriarchy and toxic male standards, and not just ones perpetuated by men, but also ones that are somewhat perpetuated by women. And I know you can make the argument that this does always come back to men, but regardless, like, he's sitting there sort of trying to ascertain, like, are you going to be okay with us, with me, with our life if money isn't here? And she's kind of like, not really. I at this point in my life, I do not think I'm prepared to live a life of poverty. I'm not going to be doing it. And I don't hate Victoria for it. She doesn't know the weight this conversation holds. But yeah, Timothy sits there and is like, okay, but where it goes from here is now his self-deletion fantasies involve Victoria being part of them. It's a murder-suicide. It's horrific. And once you realize the show is going down this route and really sticks here, this isn't like a one-off weird dream sequence. Like, they go down this path for a while. I was absolutely captivated and hooked. I thought this was dark, really disturbing, uncomfortable territory. If you watch the first season of White Lotus, where it's just a guy realizing that his dad had a gay fling and now he wonders if he's gay. If you compared season 1 to what's going on in season 3, an actual real breakdown and analysis of what leads to men kind of like pulling off murder suicides with their family, I think it's just really fascinating. And I admire the maturity and the sense of dread that this plotline builds. There's this sick weight throughout the entire season as you're watching these family interactions that feel simultaneously sinister and disturbing and uncomfortable and incredibly darkly funny. I don't know how Mike White is able to pull this off, but there's this tragic sense of humor when Victoria is flippantly being like, "Oh, I couldn't live without money," and he's taking this very literally and like, "Okay, I guess you make the list." It's horrific, and simultaneously, given how much time and what a slow burn season this has been, it puts you in a really uncomfortable position as the audience because you understand how Timothy has got to this point. Eventually, he goes to Saxon and is like, Saxon, they start having a heart to heart, and Saxon incriminates himself and he's like, "Oh, Dad, I don't think, if your business isn't going, I have nothing, my work is my whole life," because Saxon works for his father's company. So then now he shows up in his dad's delusions about wiping out himself and his family. And this peaks in the finale in such a way where my jaw was on the floor. So there's this whole subplot about, which I will get into when I break down Piper's character, but there's this whole subplot where Piper goes to a monastery, right? And she wants to live with the monks. That's her new thing. And then she comes back and Victoria's placed essentially a bet, where Victoria's basically like, "See if you like it. If you do like it, we'll let you stay. If not, no harm, no foul, and we all go home together." Piper gets back and Timothy's seen there like, "I'm just so proud of you, darling. I'm just so proud that you went on the thing and you showed that you're not super into money, and that's really good." And then Piper kind of just breaks and goes, "You know what? The vegetarian meals weren't that good, and the bed was all right, but it wasn't as good as our bed, and I didn't want to seem like a rich bitch, but I kind of am." And it's a great moment because now, in the most darkly comic moment of the season, Timothy's seen there like, God damn it, I guess I got to put you on the list too. It's simultaneously sad, horrific. Victoria is sitting there having one of her only victories of the season, which is, "I know my daughter at her core. I know her and I are quite similar." And there's an interesting line that's explored, which I will get into when we talk about Victoria and Piper, but there's this interesting angle that's explored between these two around the fact that, like, obviously Piper sees so much of herself in Victoria and vice versa, and Piper really rejects that and punishes her mother the most out of everyone in the family. And at the end of the day, Victoria does know her better than anyone else in the family. It's really well done and kind of looks at that like internalized misogyny that was explored in Succession between Shiv and her mother. Really well done. Regardless, finally, Timothy does decide to go through with it. And he goes through with it not through guns either. He goes through with it by creating a pina colada with this toxic fruit that grows on the island. And I love the way this was delivered, right? So at the start of the season, they briefly mention it and you're like, yeah, whatever. I don't think this show is like Severance, by the way. I don't think every single thing needs hyper analysis where you're like, "Oh my God, that's the thing that's going to happen." This isn't Severance. You're not meant to be seen there drawing like dartboards and being like, "Okay, then this is not," like, no. But when she set that up, I did go, maybe that's going to come back. In the final season, I think what I love is the fact that the woman that has the phones that works at the White Lotus is so on the nose about it. It almost felt like self-referential comedy where it's like, this is the way that you are going to wipe out your family if you want to. Like, she literally is like, "Don't eat those fruits because people that eat the fruits do it to self-delete." And like, it's very, very effective, by the way, but like, don't do it. But like, if you did, it's pretty much the most effective way to do what you're thinking of doing. I thought it was so on the nose in such a really, really funny way. But regardless, he makes the pina coladas. Oh my God, I love the scene at dinner where he's kind of talking his family into the pina coladas. And then Lockie is the only one that hasn't, kind of like voiced this love for money and this love for his current life. So Timothy doesn't let him drink it. He's like, no. And there's something so just tragic about his like insistence on kind of not having Lachlan as part of it, because he shows there is still part of him that does care. It's just fucked. It's a really fucked situation. And you can see that there's still some humanity. So in his weird way, he actually thinks the murder of his family is justified in his current razzle-plammed out, stressed out state. If that makes sense. Like the fact that he chooses to spare Lockie and kind of insists at being like, "This is not for you. This is too much for you, my poor sweet child," shows that there is some internal logic that he knows what he's doing is fucked up and isn't sitting there thinking this is like a divine relief. It's really interesting. So regardless, this is where the season gets a little interesting for me, because up until this point I had no notes. I was full down for wiping out the whole family. Like I actually thought, or like sparing Lachlan wiping out the whole family. I was picturing the visuals of them all sitting there with the cups in their hands. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Like, what a way to end a season. And I thought just threw the show into such a dark, uncomfortable territory. And I think it's well done. Again, I was talking about before that this show sets up this kind of want for violence, and you're sitting there, like, at least me, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but maybe you guys don't agree, but I was sitting there slightly disappointed that they didn't go through with it. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with, what does this say about me? What does this say about how well the show has been written? That part of me thought this was a bit of a release for Tim. Really, really just insane. Like, an insane level of writing to pull off this idea that there was going to be any sense of catharsis for Tim through what he was doing. And you kind of snap out of it with Tim, because as the season progresses, as the show comes to a close, and you let go of the idea that Tim was going to do that. I think part of that is the audience has been watching a slow burn show for like 8 hours. So you're begging for something big to happen, and you thought this was going to be the big thing. So I think as you sit with the fact that that isn't happening, then they get you again with the whole Lachlan. And that to me felt quite earned. If it was Lachlan drank what was left of the drink and passed away, that felt like sweet, kind of bittersweet justice for Tim, right? Like the family member he wanted to spare is the one that bit it. But at the end of the day, I don't think Tim, in his normal lorazepam free state, does actually want to do what he was thinking. But at the same time, I think it's a really interesting discussion, right? Oftentimes in real life, when you hear these cases that happen of men wiping themselves out and their family, or committing DV and taking their partner out, taking their wife out with them, which is an epidemic in Australia, by the way, at the moment. That's why I'm taking this plotline so seriously. I think when you hear about this, it's hard to imagine the steps that get here. It's such a horrific crime that you're like, I can't even picture a normal person being like this. And you often hear that, like, he was a completely normal, loving husband, showed no signs of violence or anger. But I think, again, it speaks to the fact that a lot of men internalize all this stuff. And I think there is something really haunting about the idea that the family are going to go back home with this guy that might, in his downtime, actually secretly have thoughts of doing this to himself and them. And they're just going to continue their lives with him. They have no idea how close they got to being wiped out by him. I think it's such an uncomfortable, disturbing idea. And I think nails, again, what I was talking about before, that when these things do happen, so many people are like, oh, he was a local teacher, he's a community member, he was head of the PTA, I can't believe he did that. But it's like, in the heads of these men, there is some fucked up, insane shit going on, and they think they're justified in their moments. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. And I do even like the fact that they faked out Lachlan. There was this kind of implied divine intervention and almost spiritual swap with Rick, which I'll get into in Rick's ending, where it almost felt like Rick dying allowed Lachlan to be alive. I think this was intentional. I don't think this was a reach. It was almost like they were both looking up to the sky, and as one eye's closed, the other eye's opened. We hadn't seen Lachlan for ages, and to cut from Rick to Lachlan, it felt like there was this karmic loop that the show was implying had just closed. So really, really fascinating. And I just thought the way the show handled this was expertly done. Regardless, let's move on to Saxon. So, wannabe Slayer Saxon, all right? So Saxon is Patrick Schwarzenegger, played by Patrick Schwarzenegger. His whole deal is that he essentially just wants to be alpha king dog, all right? And he wants Lockie to represent that. I think a lot of people hated Saxon at first. I pitied him. I had empathy, sympathy for him. He clearly wasn't very good with women. He wasn't very good socially. He gives everyone the ick. So many people were watching the show being like, are we meant to think Saxon's hot? This is a really bad performance. No, he's meant to be misfiring. And I think what it felt like to me is someone who tells their family or tells their younger brother that they're the king of this stuff, and really they actually kind of suck at it. I suck at it. I saw him as a pretty pathetic, fragile character, and I found what they were doing with him really interesting. The fact that, like, he's on holiday, he's out of his usual environment, he wants to shine and like pull all these women and be like the macho leader to his brother, and then spreads his kind of like really over the top chauvinistic ideals and pursuits onto Lachlan, only for Lachlan to then treat Saxon the way Saxon tries to treat women. It's incredibly fascinating, because Lachlan essentially just spits it back out and pursues his brother. It's it's so interesting. And Yeah, I also think when the season started, I thought they were going down a different line. I thought they were suggesting that Saxon was trying to groom Lachlan, or there was this incestuous vibe where he is trying to like gear him that way. There were also some comments about Piper that felt really strange. There was, and I do think there was an angle that Lachlan was also going to try and court Piper towards the end when they're talking about him staying in the monastery. There was a level of rejection he felt that didn't feel normal, and it felt like that Saxon had kind of like tried to teach Lachlan all this really kind of heavy, intense stuff about sleeping with people and courting people. And Lachlan, as he said, being in a family of narcissists and being a people pleaser, thought that like spreading it outwards to his siblings was like an appropriate thing to do. And you can't really blame him, because if he's been growing up with Saxon and Saxon's always been like this, it's probably warped his fucking mind and crossed his wires. But really interesting. On top of that, hot take, I didn't hate Saxon as much as everyone did. He sucked at flirting, but I think truthfully, again, I thought he was pathetic. I thought he was someone that probably walks around town and says he's really successful with women and really rich, and then goes home and wants to cry because he's so insecure and feels really pathetic and like a failure, you know? And we see this throughout the season. I think his arc with Chelsea, where Chelsea opens his eyes and teaches him, you know, to lean inwards and this isn't who he really is and really wants, is an accurate character assessment. It felt like to me that Saxon was playing a character this entire season. It fully checked out to me, and that's why I never hated him as much as I think some people did, because yes, technically he's a bit of a fuckboy, but not really. He's not even particularly successful at it. The only action he gets this season is Lachlan jerking him off. Lachlan sleeps with someone, Saxon doesn't. And I think there's something to be said about that. This idea that Saxon thinks he's like this absolute slayer, but really I think he's probably the guy that peaked in high school and he's a bit of a loser now. And I think he's a really tragic, sad character. He lives in the shadow of his dad, and he lives in the shadow of probably who he used to be. And our Lachlan is crushing Punani more than him, for lack of a better term, and then beats his beats Saxon off. Like, yeah, I found it really, really interesting, and I liked where his character went. I would have found it even more tragic if he ended up drinking the Kool-Aid, drinking the pina colada. But yeah, I thought Saxon and where he ended up and the self-reflection he was doing, and even his reaction to clearly realizing what Timothy had done, you know, when he opens his phone. We need to circle back to Timothy. I'm so sorry. I forgot to mention that at the end when he's on the boat, to me, I read it not that he felt free. I think he knows that his family is not going to be able to handle being poor. You see that in Saxon's initial reaction. You see Victoria seemingly stimming out and freaking out. I might be misreading that moment, but to me it felt like he knows inevitably that this family is going to crash and burn. Victoria, as Mike White said, Victoria is going to find her own way to navigate it, which will probably be finding someone new. And I didn't take it that he was looking at the water feeling free. I took it that he's looking at the water being like, well, if it ever comes down to it, I can always do what I was thinking of doing, or I can always, at the very least, self-delete myself. You know, that's how I took it. I thought this was a really dark ending. But regardless, circling back to Saxon, his reaction even to realizing that his dad isn't the hero he sees him as, there is a sense of tragedy there and loss there, and like his identity is tied to his dad. So ultimately, I don't know if I'm being too soft. I find Saxon a really pathetic, tragic character. You know, even when Saxon's like, oh, don't take advantage of me when him and Lachlan are taking drugs, it's a dumb, shitty joke that's playing on an actual issue in society that probably Saxon has at least a few friends they've engaged in. But the way this pays off for Saxon is essentially that happens to him, all right? Like he's taken advantage of drunk. And I love when he approaches Lachlan about this, and Lachlan just goes like, oh, you just seem really lonely and sad. It's such a pathetic moment for Saxon. Like, Lachlan should be the one embarrassed, but Lachlan's reasoning of like, oh, you know, I'm a people pleaser and you just seem left out and lonely over there, so I thought I'd help you out, is a reflection of Saxon as well, and how much he wants this and how much he doesn't normally achieve this. It's incredibly interesting. Just while I've got you guys, please consider gaining a membership to this channel. I talk about every movie and show I've watched every month in the form of a podcast, and I've also discussed every episode of White Lotus as it comes out. So you'll get my initial reactions to the episodes in a bit more depth. If you're interested in that, please consider gaining a membership or signing up on Patreon. Thank you so much, and back to the video. So now we talk about Lachlan, our favorite twink. So Lachlan seemed like he was confused with his sexuality. You know, the way he was looking at his brother was definitely incestuous, but I was also like, he's probably had his wires crossed by his brother's constant like sexual energy. But regardless, Lachlan is a fascinating enigma. I think he's just at a young age. He's clearly there's points where he seems interested in Piper. There's points where he seems interested in Saxon. There's points like even the way he asked Piper about whether she's had sex or not had a really strange undercurrent to it. And the way he asked whether he could stay at the monastery with Piper felt like he wanted to get close to her, the way he was close with Saxon. But on top of that, he does sleep with Greg's partner at one point. And I just find his character really quite fascinating. He doesn't seem like he knows what he wants. He seems like he's constantly attached to all the family members around him. And I think the assessment that the spiritual advice, the posture guy at the start of the season gives to him about how the way he carries himself, his posture, indicates people pleasing, indicates that he's around a bunch of strong personalities, checks out. It's an accurate assessment. And I like that comes back around and is weaponized in such a strange, toxic way towards Saxon, where he's like, I'm a people pleaser, I'm surrounded by narcissists, like almost to justify what he did. But really just an interesting character. And I like that even though, again, similar to what they put off with Timothy, where you somehow understand a really dark, tortured character. Here, Lachlan's done some crazy incest is wincest stuff, but at the end of the season, that doesn't disqualify him from a bunch of pity and empathy. When I thought he was going to die, I felt genuinely really awful. I was looking at him, and instead of seeing it as this funny incest subplot or this juicy incest subplot, I was like, what a tragic existence this kid has had if he's about to die. He was the only one that was exempt from his father's toxic internal logic of why they deserved to die. And on top of that, he's now, in his head drowning and not seeing a chance for any, like he was so confused about his sexuality and who he was and who he wanted to be, and was just a victim of all these strong personalities around him. And now he's just dying. He's just about to croak. And I thought it was really, really effective because, yeah, Lachlan, it's just someone who struggles to really connect with people around him and is defined by everyone except his own wants and beliefs. And I assume for Lachlan, actually, no, I was going to say hopefully after Lachlan resurrected that he's going to pursue things more vividly, but it seems like he's almost stepping into Saxon's role with the symbolism of him now wearing the glasses the way Saxon was at the start. Saxon now has his sunglasses off, his eyes are open, he's reading actual good self-help books rather than like toxic male books or whatever, right? Like he's actually reading books that will help him be a more whole person. Whereas it looks like Lachlan, after this trauma he's had for the entire week, is probably going to go down a darker path. But very interesting stuff with Lachlan. Next we get to Piper. Piper, no. So yeah, Piper. We get to Piper, and I like Piper. I find her interesting because we should have seen the twist coming that she, she rejects the monastery and actually likes her rich life coming. But for a while, for me, it was up in the air. She did, as I mentioned before, she pushes back on everyone, but it seems like she pushes back the most with her mother. There's so much internalized misogyny going out towards her mother. I think that's because she sees herself in her mum. She knows that she is her mother's daughter. She knows that even though she judges her mum for her, like, money hungry ways or what she likes in life, she is also that. She's like her mum, and I think she's fighting that and rejecting that so desperately. Whereas you look at Lachlan and Saxon, and they're not exactly like their dad, but they both engage in who they are and where they come from. Whereas Piper is desperately trying not to be that. And I think the payoff here, that final scene where she finally just goes, oh, I didn't like it, and the food wasn't that good, and they did this and that, and blah, blah. It was perfect. It was so well done, and I love that Victoria was right. Victoria knew her daughter in her soul. Just almost a touching moment, right? Even though it's played for laughs, and it's devastating because this is sealing her fate with her father, I think Victoria giving a thumbs up to a checked out Timothy Ratliff is a well-earned, sweet moment. And I truthfully think Victoria is hard done by. She's obviously fun to parody. It's an incredible performance by Parker Posey. But I don't know. I was watching that scene where at the start where she's surrounded by her family and she doesn't want to talk to Kate and everyone's judging her and giving her shit. And I'm like, get off Victoria's back. Like, I actually think Victoria's kind of a vibe. She knows who she is. She wants to keep it to her own family unit and herself. She doesn't want to like hurt anyone or affect anyone. She just wants to chill and be in her own little rich privilege bubble. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay. And I think the hate she gets from her own family and from the audience was a bit unjustified in my opinion. She's kind of a diva. I like her. So talk about Victoria now. Yeah, that scene where she doesn't remember who Kate is. So many people in the internet were like, "Oh, that was really rude of Victoria," and the characters themselves like that was really rude of Victoria. I don't know. Am I a Grinch? I kind of disagree. Like, she did her best. She went, "Oh yeah, I think I remember you." Like, I don't know. Do you guys really think it's a Disney movie? And she's going to be like, "Yeah, Kate, let's hang out." Random person I was at a baby shower with who I don't remember the name and haven't seen in 12, 15 years. I want to hang out so I can have obnoxious surface level conversation. Like, no, she kind of went, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And then Kate didn't take the cue, in my opinion. That social interaction went way too long. Way too long, in my opinion. Maybe I'm an asshole, but regardless, look, I don't actually hate Kate that much. I think she's fine. But my point more so being that I think Victoria is in her own little vibe, and I don't mind her. You know, she likes her lorazepam. We can sit here and talk about how toxic that is, but she likes her lorazepam. She likes chilling on her phone. She's Victoria, you know, and I like her. And I think the fact that she does know her daughter in her soul was a nice payoff and a nice victory for Victoria, in my opinion. All right, next we have Rick and Chelsea. So Rick was my favorite character for most of this season. Every time he was on screen, I was hooked. I love Rick. Sorry, I love Walton Goggins, the guy that plays Rick. He's incredible in Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight. He's also in this show called Vice Principals, where he's fantastic. He's also in The Righteous Gemstones. He's a great actor. People keep throwing out the term like, he's a really good character actor. He's a good actor. He was excellent this season. And look, there is a lot of toxicity in Rick and Chelsea's. There's a lot of toxicity in Rick and Chelsea's relationship. All right, it is there, and we will get into it. But just hear me out while I talk about some empathy and understanding I have for Rick. First off, I relate to someone who just wants to go on holiday and do their own thing and chill and doesn't want to socialize with people he doesn't know. Like I was vibing with him when Chelsea would come up and be like, "Yo, do you want to hang out with Greg, this boring old guy that's weird as fuck?" And Rick's like, "Oh, I just wanted to go back to the apartment and wallow in my own misery." I get it. You know, I get it. And I thought, truthfully, I know what they represent. Rick and Chelsea is a really toxic vibe. This whole thing of like, I think I can change him. But I thought the only difference here is this isn't some like toxic fuckboy that's scrolling on TikTok all the time that like doesn't pay his girlfriend any attention. And his biggest problem is that his like gym bag clothing line isn't super successful. All right. And he's punching walls and being a little piece of shit. All right. This is someone whose mother overdosed on drugs. And at this point, a man killed his father. All right. So yeah, I think his sadness here is justified and understandable, and I think adds a level of understanding to their entire relationship. If his sadness was just general mopey, like, "Oh, I'm sad because I don't make enough money," like, different story. But I had a bit of benefit of the doubt or charity for Rick because that sadness was genuine pain. Like when he had the initial therapy session at the start, I was like, holy shit. Like this is some deep sadness. And I kind of got the vibe with Rick and Chelsea. I remember in maybe episode 2 when they had sex together after he'd kind of been distant, like me and my fiance both looked at each other and we're like, I kind of get it. Which is bad. And this show is definitely exploring that. But simultaneously, their love story serves as a perfect example of why you shouldn't give your... And again, like a perfect example of the toxic masculinity spreading outwards. It serves as a perfect example of why you should not be with someone trying to fix them. Because at the end, you shouldn't be with someone broken because they will break you. It serves as that perfectly. But at the same time, it also serves as this Shakespearean level Romeo and Juliet tragedy and this Greek Oedipus tragedy as well. Is it Oedipus? Fuck. The one where he kills his dad in a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is it Oedipus? Odious? Oedipus. It is Oedipus. Regardless, it does feel like this huge just like culmination. It feels like a myth the way it's presented. And there's only one real issue I have with the way the plot goes, and that is the way it's revealed that it's Rick's father. But we'll get there when we get there. So regardless, for the majority of the episode, it's very clearly telegraphed, by the way. Like multiple times, Chelsea's seen there being like bad things come in threes. She gets hurt twice at Rick's hands, twice, you know, and she's seen there going, yeah, these things happen often. These things will come back around. She talks about how they're yin and yang. There's literally a point where she says, I'm pretty sure to Rick, she says like, if something bad happens to you, it happens to me as well. We're in this to the death. All right. Like they spell out how this is going to go so many times, but I'd be lying if I wasn't just like, you know, biting my teeth as it actually unfolded. So I thought the way it explored their relationship, I do believe the love for Chelsea she had is earnest. I think a really interesting line to walk down, and this, I hope this doesn't come off as I'm judging Chelsea too harshly, but a really interesting kind of line of thinking is if Rick wasn't as old man daddy attractive as Walton Goggins is in this season of White Lotus, if he wasn't as well off, would Chelsea still have the same level of intense, like this is our love story? I'm not saying she's only with him for his money, sorry, but I do think that conversation they have about being with old men for their money with Saxon does hit home a little. And I think Chelsea does do some self-reflection. And I'm just saying, I think the money helps. I think the fact that he's good looking helps. And I think it also convinces us and as an audience, right? If Rick wasn't as charming as Walton Goggins was throughout this season, none of his shit would fly. But I think it was this pitch perfect delivery where it's like, he would say something mean, but there was a bit of sass and a bit of like, oh, like as an audience member, I was sitting there being like, no, he doesn't mean that. No, he's kind of sweet. And I do think in his own twisted way, Rick does love Chelsea. He does love Chelsea, or he wouldn't have taken her on this fucking holiday. All right. Like, I know he went on this holiday to potentially kill his father's murderer, but like, if he really wanted to do that, if he was really willing to die for that and didn't want to hang out with her, he wouldn't have bought. Like, to an extent, he keeps her around because he likes her. He's just too broken of a man emotionally to just be able to say that and admit that. So, him sort of being like, yeah, of course I like you. Yeah, is his thing. And I'm not saying that's good. He is a deeply flawed, unhealed guy. And that's the point of where this conversation goes, where this TV season goes, sorry. But yeah, I found their dynamic. I could feel actual romantic tension between them despite how awful it was. So now we need to talk about the where Rick's arc goes. So initially you find out that he has this deep sadness. You then find out why exactly he's so driven to find this guy, kill this guy. It's because he killed his father and his mum OD'd on drugs. And you're like, this is an awful backstory. I think what's interesting is after a while, you kind of get behind him. You are sitting there being like, just hang out with Chelsea, man. But given how sad he is, given how palpable his emotions are around this, I genuinely felt like, yeah, he did lose a childhood. And I think people being like, oh, he's choosing to stay in these emotions. He's choosing to be sad. Yes, in the current moment, he could be just hanging out with Chelsea and vibing. But I think this idea that he could just be happy, he should just be happy, given what he went through or what he believed he went through, bit dismissive. Like, it's a rough upbringing, all right? And he could focus on Chelsea, yes, but I get why there's this deep sadness that he can't shake, and he wants to be angry at someone. I think that's Rick's downfall. It isn't the sadness itself, it's the fact that he chooses violence. In saying that, though, I pretty much had no problems with White Lotus except for how Rick's arc kind of went. I like where it ultimately ends. I think where it ends with Chelsea and Rick being dead in the water is incredible and disturbing, and there's visuals there that I haven't been able to get out of my head. But my big issue, right, is he goes over to old man's house. He goes, "You killed my dad." And the old guy just does not help himself at all. He doesn't sit there and goes, no, I didn't. No, I did not. Or I am your father. It's like, what I would have preferred is if Rick shows up, the guy pushes back saying, your mother's a liar, and goes to say, I'm your dad. And then Rick shoots him, right? Before he gets that. And then you find out later that's where the tragedy works, right? Or he shoots him on sight, then looks around, looks at photos, slowly realizes it's his father. Or truthfully, hot take, I don't think it should have been his father. But I'm saying if you want it to be his father, that's how it should have been handled. My issue is their initial interaction. It just makes no sense that this guy didn't tell Rick that he's his father. Like, unless, again, it's kind of leaning into toxic masculinity, not being able to talk about your feelings and, like, emotional things. And, like, men would rather be violent than actually, like, say what's on their mind. But I just found that initial interaction, especially after the reveal that's his dad, fucking bizarre. And then so Rick pushes him over and he's like, you know what? Seeing an old man so frail, it just took the monkey off my back. It made me feel better. And I'm like, okay, this I can deal with. So at the point where I thought it was just the old guy that killed him and not his father, I was like, okay, I like where this plot is going. Then I even like the twist that the old guy comes back and is essentially like, I'm gonna murder you. All right. Like the old guy comes back and says, your mother was a drug addict. I think he might also call her a whore, but I may be wrong. That might have been a self-insert. But regardless, he calls her a liar and a drug addict, and then summons security guards with guns to seemingly kill Rick. Like the way it felt to me was like Rick was about to get killed, not just like lightly escorted off the premises. So this is where my big issue comes in. Because I don't think the reveal at the point where they reveal it, if they revealed it earlier, totally different. But the point where they reveal it is so stupid and doesn't add anything to the story and truthfully feels like a fucking telenovela or something. So Rick shoots this guy who he believes is his father. And I think it's a really interesting moment because he looks basically every escape direction and realizes at every turn there is a security guard with a gun. He really can't escape. So I know some people have taken it that he was just so angry at this guy that he shot him. I almost took it as like, well, I can't escape anyway. I'm like a snake in a cage. I may as well bite because I'm fucked either way. I thought Rick felt like he wasn't getting out of this alive and went, well, if I'm not getting out of this alive, I'm going to kill him. But maybe that's a misread. Maybe he could have got out. I just don't think so. I think the intensity, what the show was communicating was he was trapped in this moment. And he thought, well, if I'm going to die, I may as well take him out with me. Kind of like Timothy Ratliff, right? So he goes up to the guy, shoots him. And then in the worst moment of the season, because the arc's done, like in my opinion, it's perfect, all right? It's perfect. He shoots the guy that killed his dad. He leans into violence, which the whole season has been about not doing. He leans into violence, even though the monkey felt better off his back. Again, he did feel trapped and I figured it was like I may as well. But regardless, he lent into violence and Chelsea cops a bullet. Chelsea dies. That's a perfect conclusion, a perfect yin and yang. It's obvious, yes. It was set up, yes. But that's okay. That's what Greek tragedy, which is clearly what this is going for, feels like. These inevitable things, right? This clear A to B punishment. And if he just didn't do that, if he just didn't push the guy over, if he just tried to reason with them maybe, or if he went, like if something went differently, he could have got out of this. But killing this guy seals Chelsea's fate is perfect. Perfect. What we didn't need is after he's killed the guy, being told, oh, that is your father. What are we doing? All right. So on one end, I know I'm going to get a lot of comments being like, no, there's something so deep and powerful about like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like he thought that his father was killed and then he ended up killing his father. Guys, I get on paper, this sounds cool. All right. You can give this a court reading and convince yourself it's good. You can sit there, I get what they're going for. I don't think it was well pulled off. I think if they wanted to do the whole father twist, you needed Rick to kind of like, my issue is, right, is Rick, whether this guy is his father or not, like at that moment, killing him made sense for the character, all right? This guy is literally getting 3 security guards to kill Rick. All right. Like this guy is literally about to murder Rick. He's been weird as fuck. He's insulted his mother. So when Rick killed him, it made sense. And truthfully, I don't think the reveal that it's his father makes a lick of difference at that point, because if anything, it's just, oh, my father was going to kill me. My father had 3, like it's worse. It's not tragic because Rick killing him makes sense to me whether he's his father or not at that point in time. This guy wasn't seen there being like, no, there's something you don't know. Like, that's what would have made this scene work. If Rick was going to kill him and the guy was like, please, no, there's things you don't know. Please don't do it. And actually like, a scared, frail old man. Sure. But what is revealed in this episode is he's not a scared, frail old man. That's what gets Rick going. He comes up and intimidates Rick and roasts his mother and gets security guards and basically is planning to murder Rick like a savage. So Rick is like, oh, this isn't some poor lowly old guy, so I'm gonna kill him now, is basically what happened. So I don't think it makes a difference that it's his biological father, not father in spirit. It's not like there was this tragic story. This is how it should have gone. There should have been some tragic story that came out that like his mother refused to let him see Rick or like something, right? Like they were taken away for whatever reason, or he was just sitting there begging, being like, please, I'm your father, don't do this. This isn't what you want. But instead, it's like this guy was planning on murdering Rick. So Rick killed him and got in first. And this father reveal doesn't add anything emotionally. To me, it doesn't make a difference. I don't know. Like at that point in time, it's still the same guy Rick has killed. It doesn't, like, it just doesn't work for me. The only thing you can really say is that Rick was misguided being that sad the whole time. But that depends on whether you think the sadness of your father being murdered is that much worse than the sadness of your father abandoning you completely despite being really rich, lying to you throughout your life, and like abandoning your drug-addled mother. Like, I don't think the difference is that great, to be honest. Yes, maybe you don't kill him, but yeah, it just didn't work for me. It just didn't work for me at all. I thought it was really clunky, and I think it was clearly trying to add a sense of drama and tragedy that just didn't work for me, because I don't like the Rick shot him for reasons that still check out, whether it's his father at that point or not. I think it was mistimed, and if they wanted that moment where Rick realizes he'd shot his father, it needed to be structured a completely different way. It's the only thing that really bugged me. Only thing that really bugged me. I do appreciate that it really hammers in and nails the fact that this whole pursuit of violence was completely pointless and just led to harm. But yeah, at that point, I felt like he was a rat in the cage, and yeah, had to shoot his dad, truthfully. And yeah, I just think the reveal when it happened doesn't make a difference. Like, I would have liked it better if Rick, instead of being shocked, was like, okay, and you know what I mean? It's just such a shame, because the ending is so good with these two characters. Them lying in the water. There's a sense of cruelty as well. Chelsea having her head down, facing down, drowning, while he's looking up and seemingly having this moment of like wholeness and healing. Like he's almost smiling, looking up into the sky, because his life has been filled with so much pain and anguish, and now there's this release, whereas Chelsea has just basically got her head in the mud, dead due to that, is just so effective and so tragic. And yeah, I really like the idea that I took it that Lachlan, when he took the drink, literally died. I thought they were visualizing that through the whole water and him drowning, and the monks actually rejecting him, like literally drowning and not coming back. I thought they communicated that he did die. And I thought there was like some karmic implication with the way it was cut here, that like Rick looking up into the sky and dying, and then Lachlan looking up into the sky and coming back. I thought that was entirely intentional. And yeah, I don't think it's a reach. I think that's what they're going for. But yeah, I thought it was perfect. I love both of their bodies in the body bags going to the plane. Perfect. Like nailed it. And I think I love that this show simultaneously romanticized their relationship, made us kind of get it, made me and my fiance go, oh, it's kind of hot, isn't it? You know, like it would be nice to be that broody and emotional and then get home and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know what I mean? It simultaneously romanticized the dynamic, only to then give us the bleakest, cruelest tragedy. And like, here's what happens when he leans into his violent tendencies. So I'm not mad that Rick shot him. I literally wouldn't change anything, minus the Rick dad reveal. Just felt stupid. And if you do want it being Rick's father, even after he's killed him, you need to restructure it. That needed to be last episode, and then it's revealed this episode. Regardless, you know, it just, the way it was handled was clunky, which is such a shame, because everything else is perfect. Perfect. I even loved the interplay between Saxon, Rick, and Chelsea. The fact that like Rick has no idea that Chelsea was kind of building this connection with Saxon. She clearly kind of likes Saxon. Maybe Saxon is like someone she needs, because Saxon is receptive to change. Saxon did actually change. Saxon didn't lead into his words tendencies. He did show serious character growth. He's at an age where he can do that. And maybe if Ashley wants to be with someone she can change, maybe that's the type of guy, because Rick gets her killed. I think there's such a tragic sliding doors moment where Rick gets back. She abandons Saxon, runs off to Rick. And Saxon's sitting there sad, because I think Saxon also knew like, oh, that's someone I really could have connected with. It's a great little sort of what could have been moment. I would have loved, by the way, like this whole shooting went off and we didn't really get the Ratliff family or any people really responding to it. I would have loved seeing how maybe Saxon felt about Chelsea being dead, but I guess they're too rich and too narrow-minded to notice, but they came on the boat together. It's interesting they're not on the boat together on the way back. All right, now we need to talk about Rick Frank's monologue. All right, so Rick's friend Frank's monologue. So Sam Rockwell shows up out of nowhere, completely steals the show, goes on this insane monologue about, if I remember correctly, it was this insane monologue that he stopped drinking and then he needed to find new purpose. So he started fucking a bunch of women, like all these women all the time, and quote unquote to find the answer. Again, this feels, sex can be violent, right? Fucking, like there is a difference between lovemaking, sex, and like fucking, all right? And sometimes both parties are down for it. But I think even this does lean into the idea of violence and men's relationship with violence, or our society's relationship with violence. I think the way Sam Rockwell talks about the way he sleeps with these women, the way that it's entirely about him, the way it turns into this thing of he wanted to feel like what it was like to get fucked. He almost considered transitioning. He wanted to, like, it was insane. He was trying to like, he started getting fucked by people that looked like him while looking into the eyes of the girls, the women, the type of women he used to fuck. It's an insane monologue, but I do actually think, in like looking back on it, it actually nails what it's going for. It's almost this kind of commentary on the way that like people just, some people are wired this way and have this like energy and anger and violence in their system that needs to be released somehow. I think it's really interesting that even though Rick was looking at Frank completely horrified, who's Rick to talk, man? Like Rick goes on a full murder plot, you know? So yes, like Frank's monologue is horrific. And there's, I think notably the most horrific thing is the way he was talking about sex in general, the way like women were entirely there for him to like actualize his self. Like obviously this dude did not care about closing the orgasm gap. Can we be completely honest? But I think like, yeah, there was just such an interesting angle that was explored in this conversation. I think it's really also notable the fact that in the end montage, Frank is one of the only characters at peace. He's in the monastery doing prayers and seemingly coming to some sort of closure, compared to Rick, right? Like Rick just chose violence, chose the dark path, whereas Frank seemingly has like done all this heinous shit and now is like, all right, I'm going to like pray and find a different mean. Really interesting stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. And yeah, I thought the monologue, I almost want to do an entire video just on the monologue. I need to watch it a bunch of times and really wrap my head around it. But I thought it was bewildering and fascinating. And yeah, I think summed up exactly what this show was talking about: violence, sex, and men, and how it spreads and the harm it causes. And I think Sam Rockwell delivering this monologue in a way that shows no concern for the women he'd been sleeping with, or the psychological toll any of his insane, fucked up things he's doing, is really telling. And again, leans into the angle that all of these men are inflicting harm without really realizing. And furthermore, does comment on the idea that, one, like fetishization of different races and cultures, but each season of The White Lotus has been about how white people essentially go to these different places and just take advantage of the place's resources and kind of, you know, like natural resource, takes advantage of these places' resources, takes advantage of, you know, the economy, and like kind of leaves their terrible mark on these countries and then goes back home to their rich, privileged lifestyles, while the people that work there and the community is kind of fucked over. And I think what Sam Rockwell's monologue here, what Frank's monologue was doing here, was a physical human manifestation of that, right? Like he's literally fucking over people. He's literally spreading his seeds, spreading his toxicity, any means necessary, and not thinking of the consequences. The way each season of White Lotus, they show up and all these characters inevitably lead to someone getting murdered, someone getting dying, a bunch of people being traumatized, and then they just go back and like, oh, that was a crazy week, wasn't it? I think it's so well done, and it not only sums up what this season is doing, but what all 3 seasons were doing. I also do wonder, is there something to be said if Rita said yes to Rick's therapy session at the end there? Because I did feel like he was trapped, and I feel like maybe what the show was implying was the only way out was if he went to that therapy session, and they obviously can't kill him while he's at a therapy session. It gives him a chance to actually go to therapy and get out. I do also find it interesting the way it was cut, and I might need to go back and watch it, but there was this moment at the start of the season, but there's this moment where they're at the table, And Rick goes, I need to see the lady. I'm freaking out. And I did actually take it that he wanted to see Amrita, wanted to see her and like therapize because he was getting really stressed. Or maybe that was just a safe haven. Did you guys take it that he was merely trying to escape the people shooting him? Or did you think he actually wanted to get to a therapy session? Because I actually took it as kind of both. I felt like he did want to get a therapy session out because he was, truthfully, I thought he was going to, it was becoming too much and was going to self-delete, and then he looked over and saw that these people were actually going to kill him. If I remember correctly, he proposed the idea of going to Amrita and then saw that, oh my god, this guy's going to kill him, and then it was all coming to a head. But regardless, let me know what you think in the comments below. Now let's talk about Laurie, Jackie, and Kate. I think this is one of the sweetest, funniest, most poignant things White Lotus has done. I think it's really well done. Each episode, the first 3 episodes, each open with 2 of the girls shit-talking another one of the girls. You know, this is, like, can we be honest? This is very typical, not just in female friendships, but in friendships in general. There's that famous Russell Brand meme. I know, bad time to mention Russell Brand, but there's that Russell Brand meme where he's talking about, like, do any of you have those friends that you just fucking hate? And I've related to that my whole life. And I think the thing is, after a while with friendships, you start having a sunk cost fallacy, all right? Now, this is normally in terms of like work hours, or like if I've spent this much money fixing my car, now I still need to get it fixed instead of getting a new one because it's cost me this much already, so I may as well ride it home. And I feel like with friendships, we get to that point a lot. And I think everyone online, like, look, I'm going to be honest, TikTok discourse is not the place you should be going for big brain takes on TV shows. I'm not saying you always need to come to me, but TikTok discourse is led by like 21, 22-year-olds that haven't had much life experience, all right? Now, I'm not that much older. I'm like 26. But, you know, I do think those 4 years make a difference. I've also had substantial life things happen lately. And I do think, like, after, my point being here is, if you're someone that just, like, ends friendships on a whim, or if you're, like, fresh out of high school, like, sure. All right? But, like, I've watched my parents be friends with people for 30, 40 years where it's, like, at their core, they're not compatible. They drive each other nuts, but it's like, you've been there for my baby shower. You've been there for my wedding, you know, like, how do I give up someone who also has these great memories attached? And at a certain point, you do just kind of go, that's them. It's the same with family. Friends become family after a while. And I feel like I'm not the only one here, but I'm sure a bunch of you have friends and family members where every time you see them, it's the same problems. And you tell yourself over and over, like, oh, they drive me nuts. But also, you know, and I think that's what this season and what these 3 characters specifically are about. And yes, okay, sure, like, Laurie started slay queening and started calling out the group on their shit, but truthfully, after a while, I started being like, okay, like, you are friends with them, like, maybe just don't go on a holiday next time, like, maybe keep it in, or say what you want to say and then bail on them. But truthfully, I thought the ending they got to was tragic and sweet and sad. And I'm going to play a clip of the Shameless podcast talking about it, because I actually, I'm not the biggest fan of them, but I thought they nailed this.
I'm glad you have a beautiful face, and I'm glad that you have a beautiful life, and I'm just happy to be at the table.
I think this was actually, I don't want to overstate it because I know it can be hyperbolic on
No,
the show sometimes. Go ahead. I think this was one of my favorite flips or like surprise twists in a show that I've watched. Even though it was subtle, I didn't see this coming, and it made me sit there and really reflect and think quite deeply about adult friendships and how they can morph and change.
I loved it. I loved it so much, I think exactly for that reason, and that it was like the most unexpected turn for me. It's very easy to discard relationships that are built out of high school, for example, where you do believe different things as you grow up, but there is something meaningful about the time you have spent together growing separately.
Yeah, well, because you know each other on such an intricate level, and it's in equal parts beautiful, but also it can be frustrating, and you can grow resentful in many ways, and there can be like ugly parts of your friendship. But at the end of the day, the love that you just heard in that clip, so strong, like beyond strong.
And the value of time. Like I do resent this idea that your friends need to think and live in the exact same way that you do. And I thought this was such astute social commentary from the White Lotus that you might look quite different, whether that's your values when it comes to something like monogamy and infidelity, or religion and, dare I say, some political leanings. I just think all of it bundled together to say, sometimes time and shared memories is enough, and that's okay, and that can still be love, and that is not invalidated because you live life differently.
But I disagree with people. Look, all right, Laurie had some things she should have called out Jackie on, all right? Because Jackie did, very interestingly, she basically like did insider trading. She was like, oh, Laurie, you should sleep with this guy. Hey, guy, don't you want to sleep with Laurie? Kind of set it up and then got jealous of the dynamic she created, which Laurie wasn't even engaging in that much. I don't think Laurie wanted to sleep with that guy that much at all. But then Jackie did. And then Kate told her, and I'm with Kate, all right? I actually do get where Kate was coming from. I do think Kate told her not to be like, oh, look at this fucked up thing Jackie did to you. Kate told her to be like, oh, wait, how funny. She slept with that guy and she has a guy back home. She shouldn't be doing that. And then, yeah, obviously Laurie took it really personally. And I was with Laurie on this one, all right? Laurie wasn't mad because she wanted to sleep with him and she was super jealous. She was mad that Jackie would make this demand, act like it's for her when it was clearly for Jackie. Jackie was trying to vicariously, sexually live through Laurie. She was trying to like, I can't cheat on my guy. I want you to sleep with him. Tried to create that demand. And then once the dynamic sort of went in Laurie's direction with that guy, Jackie jumped on it and was like, actually, no, I'm going to fuck him, because she got jealous and she decided, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. It's a well done beef. And I get why Laurie was upset, but truthfully, the people that were expecting Laurie to just slay Queen and completely demolish these two women disagree. At most, you don't talk to them after the holiday, but I don't know. Like, it was bad. It was shitty of Jackie, but at the end of the day, I actually think a conversation or two was the appropriate thing to do. Honestly, like, and as they say, like, hey, this dynamic's been around before, they bring it up now. And I do think what's interesting is when they have their big blow up, I agreed with everything Laurie was saying. I did. And I thought it was especially telling that she brings up, the fact that seemingly Jackie flirted with Kate's husband, was it at some point, or Kate's ex-boyfriend at some point. So that it's very clearly based in a repetitive behavior, but it's also like you've been friends since then and you're bringing it up now. But the big thing is, I agreed with all of Laurie's points. But what was more interesting was when Jackie and Kate had things to say about Laurie, I agree with them too. You are always disappointed. And again, I've seen people online being like, oh, that's because everyone in the world is disappointed. It's like, at a certain point, if it's that bad, if it's really that bad, remove yourself from these people. I did that recently. There was someone I tried to catch up with over and over again. I would be like, all right, do we want to lock in Wednesday? Would never hear a confirmation. And then Wednesday would roll around and last minute they'd be like, oh yeah, sure, if you're still keen. And like, eventually I just had to be like, no, actually, I'm not free anymore. And that was a big, I know that doesn't sound like a big beef, but for me, that was a big deal, not to fold and stop whatever YouTube video I was doing and see them at the last minute, because I was like, no, I need to do something to change this awful dynamic I'm in, because it doesn't work for how busy I am at the moment. And similarly with Laurie, I'm sort of sitting there being like, okay, Laurie, like, you're 100% right about these character critiques, but unless you're going to do something about it, you are just constantly disappointed. And what's more tragic is then you get to this final moment, and I don't think it was reductive. I don't think it was regressive at all. I actually think it was an honest look at how a lot of friendships are. And I think I'm asking my audience at home, like, look at your friends, look at your family members. How many of them do you have fundamental issues with that you also go, yeah, but that's also them? People that were expecting her to bite Kate's head off because she has a conservative husband, so she now goes to the group sessions. Come on, get off your high horse. You're telling me you don't have family members that are slightly politically disagreeable, and you sit there and hold them accountable. Like, maybe you do. Maybe you do, all right? And you know what? Standing up for what you believe in is really good, but I just think the way the internet talks about how this should have gone and the fact that it should have been a full-blown beef and fight and she never should have talked to them again, I personally think is missing the mark. I think there's this beautiful moment where Laurie is looking at Jacqueline and Kate in the pool, and she's on the outside. She's been on the outside since the season's come. She doesn't feel like she's one with them. She's not as well put together as they are. She doesn't have her shit figured out the way she does. Kate does have a beautiful family that she loves, and I think people were really hoping that Kate doesn't. But no, Kate does. Kate loves her husband. She loves that he leans a little conservative. She likes religion. But I think Kate was being earnest too about, like, hey, these religious people are kind of nice despite some of their political views. And Jackie and Laurie were immediately assuming that they're just massive Bible thumpers that hate abortion. Like, you don't know if they are the worst conservatives ever or if they're kind of in the middle, because Kate is seemingly in the middle. Regardless, my point being is when Laurie is looking over her friends, she's sitting there kind of going like, I did not take it as judgment. I did not take it as disdain. I took it as, you know what? I could never be this person. I tried being this person. I fucked that guy and then he stole my shit. Or he tried to get me to transfer money. But she's looking at them being like, I could never do that. I don't want to be in the pool taking selfies with my ass out. I'm not interested in that. But they are. They're happy with themselves. And that's okay. And I think also it's important to note, Jackie gave a sincere apology, guys. It took a second. And it was after a pretty heated discussion where she called out Laurie for some stuff that was pretty rough too. But she apologized. And in my opinion, an apology that I would kill for from a lot of people. She came in, she said, we can do it another time, but like, I am really sorry. It was a nice moment. It was a nice fucking moment. Like, I'm glad she apologized. And you know what? Yeah, like, so at the end, Laurie has this monologue that's beautiful. And she says she is actually glad that Kate has a beautiful family. And she's glad that Jackie has a beautiful face. I was almost tearing up. And what's sadder is, I think we've all been there. She then opens up about how she's been sad this whole holiday. She's sad when she's around them. I have friends who are just made people, who have a house, you know, they have all their shit figured out. And sometimes I get a sense of sadness around them. You know, I'm like, oh, wow, look at you guys. But you're happy for them, you know? And I've got friends that can be shallow and people in my life that are strange. But at the end of the day, like, even if I get really annoyed at them at the moment, I'll be sitting there at home being like, it's just them, you know? And don't get it wrong. I've got a cutoff game. Like, there are people I'll cut off, but you know, other times I just think there's a reason Laurie went on this holiday. There's a reason they've been friends for 20 years. And I think people need to, like, these 20-year-olds on TikTok being like, no, it's like, wait, call me when you're like 50, you know, and you've had a friend that every second week you're like, oh, fucking Laurie, oh my God. But yeah, anyways, regardless, the big thing that I loved in Laurie's section was when she talked about her own insecurities, what she was unhappy about, the fact that she feels stagnated and stuck in one place. She's unhappy with her career. She feels like she's settled and not pushing herself further. These were critiques and character assessments that Jackie, Michelle Monaghan, made about her in the first episode. And it made me reflect on those gossip sessions. I think what's so tragic is each of them were right, you know, and that was the big thing with this monologue. So it even made me reframe the way gossip is done. The fact that, like, you know, oftentimes people, when they're alone, will talk about other people because you can't help it. But like, I thought this was so well done. Like, the fact that basically everything they said about each other, yes, seemed nasty, but it was accurate character assessments because at the end of the day, they know each other to their core. They are actual friends, even though as we're watching it on a show, we're horrified and mortified. And both can be true. Similar to Rick and Chelsea, there were moments of romance and moments of like this Shakespearean love story, but it's also fucked. And this poor innocent girl died because of her man's like unhealed trauma. And similarly, like, yeah, this friendship dynamic needs work and they do some mean things to each other, but at the same time, there's something beautiful about the fact that, like, even in their gossipy moments, there are some actual character assessments that check out and are kind of like accurate, you know, like Laurie says the same things they were saying about her, about herself. It's incredibly fascinating. All right, now we have Belinda, Zion, Greg, and his wife. So with Belinda, I liked the arc here. I do think it's a little reductive to say that she became Tanya 2.0. She is engaging in behavior that does feel similarly kind of dismissive of Pornchai. But at the same time, does she really owe him anything? No. But then I ask you, did Tanya really owe Belinda anything? I guess Tanya made more of a plan and was sort of more like, spend the week with me and, you know, I'll do this thing. But also, if I remember the dynamic correctly, it was never promised. It was more so Belinda being like, oh, she mentioned it, so I need to spend all the... Okay, I might be misremembering. But regardless, I do think this parallel works and it doesn't. I'm not saying this is a flaw with the show, but I think on one end, yes, her fucking over Pornchai is sad. I think it is sad. I've seen people online be like, oh, they just fucked once, big deal. But I'm like, no, there was like a genuine connection there. And I think more so the sad part isn't maybe the massage thing, but I think more so the sad part is they had an actual connection. She made a lot of money And now she's just seemingly above him. And I know there's a sense of urgency for her to escape. She feels like Greg might take the money back, might change his mind, but there was no attempt to get his phone number. There was no, like, truthfully, I think the reason it hurts and the reason it feels sad isn't because she's doing the exact same thing Tanya did. It's the fact that she's sort of going, like, what it felt like to me is like, I don't need this connection. I don't need this right now. I've got other stuff going on. Money's elevated me to a different happiness level, or a soon to come happiness level. And yeah, that was fun while I needed it, and it's not anymore. And that's sad. And it does make you, if she didn't ever get the money, they would have been on a different path. But yeah, the fact that she didn't get his number is a bit sad. I'm not expecting her to take him with her. I'm not expecting her to completely finance his business. So no, it's not an exact one-to-one with Tanya, but the fact that she, just seemingly doesn't have any interest in him anymore at all is sad. And to me, it felt like he wanted to start the business with her, not because he wanted to start the business, but because he wanted to build a relationship with her. I think that's why it's sad. So yes, there are some parallels to Tanya, and she clearly does feel bad, and it's not on the same level, but no, I think it's sad. She needs to get away with the money. She needs to get her bag. That's fine. She doesn't owe him a beauty spa. But yeah, I think the fact that, like, no interest in getting his number. And yeah, I think it was more than having sex. And I also think it speaks to our culture's thing of like, oh, sex is just sex, big fucking deal. Like, no, you know what I mean? The way I was, the way I was raised was, like, you don't, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just saying, like, I thought they did have a connection. I thought we were all familiar with the whole trope of like a one night stand meaning something to someone and then they stop talking is a pretty cruel thing to do. And I felt like the way this ended here was sad. He clearly really liked her. And I do wonder if it was gender swapped, whether people would be sitting here being like, oh, big fucking deal. They just slept together once. Like, no, this is sad. This is sad for Pornchai. Like, no, like I thought it was sad. And yeah, given how I was raised in regards to how you treat people you've been intimate with, like, whatever, all right? But I did love the scene where Zion and Belinda negotiate. I love the twist where Belinda was like, nah, actually, go get more money. Like, she pretended like she was morally opposed to it and then went, nah, go hardball with him. I loved her reaction to getting the money. It was nice to have seemingly a happy ending. I will say, I was struggling to connect with the whole threat of Greg and Belinda. Like, obviously, Greg is a threat to Belinda, but I kind of didn't. From what I gathered, and correct me in the comments, the situation was that Greg had fled and they were looking for him, but no one knows where he is. Like, no authorities know where he is. I guess he had a fake passport. So he's living undercover. He's got a new identity, and Belinda knows who he really is. And that's the threat she serves. I'm just surprised that if Belinda can figure out who he is that quickly and bumps into him that no one else has, like that was the only thing. It was a little bit of a stretch initially, but I actually like how it ended. I love that Greg lowballed them so hard. Initially I was like, 100,000's all right, but then you find out he has $500 million. Interesting that you'll have that much money. I mean, that's how rich people stay rich, right? But super interesting that he would lowball her that hard. And I love that he gave her $5 million. I liked the ending. I really, really, really like this season. And I love that out of all people, Greg seemingly got what he wanted. Like, he's done a fucked up thing. He's been a through line through all 3 seasons. And at the end, it's implied that he's going to get his sick fucking sex fantasy. Again, this goes back to Frank and his awful sex fantasies. Like, men just keep getting what they want and spreading their shit. Like, his partner, his girlfriend, I forget her name, but she goes around to people telling them Greg's fantasy of like watching or what was it? Watching them essentially cuckolding, if I remember correctly, or being watched fucking, one or the other. But regardless, like, that's fulfilled at the end. He does a wink face to his girl and talking to the guy. I love that he got a happy ending of all people. Just insane. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please consider like, commenting, and subscribing. Please let me know any theories. I might do a follow-up video if there's anything I've missed. But thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day. Please consider getting a membership to this channel. Again, there's a podcast where I talk about everything I've watched. I also talked about every episode of White Lotus, and it's up for viewers to decide what I talk about next. So no better time to get a membership. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day.